A while back, I promised if anybody could spot my super-powered smooth brain typo, I'd feature him in the beginning of my next video. Much to my surprise, somebody actually found it. Hey, I'm Taz says, nice vid, no Invaldi info from what I can tell. Now, I'm a man of my word, so, as promised, here's your little shout out. Also, thanks for making me look like an idiot online. You know, it's been a minute since I made a Warlock dance, mostly because I hate anything that isn't a stabby stab hunter, but a while back I did a poll on what build everybody wanted to see next, and as I expected, simply because I didn't want the Warlock to get the most votes, the Warlock got the most votes. That's about where I'm at in life right now, just taking it one agonizing video at a time. On a side note, you guys can expect to see some cyberpunk videos here in the near future, but that's a special kind of self-inflicted torture. We'll talk about that later. For now, let's get back on track. That track being a Warlock concept build, one that takes advantage of multiple different fragments and both available Warlock aspects, along with the only sentient Warlock helm in Destiny history, Nezarec's Sin. Hallowed be its name. So we're going to kick this off by taking a gander at some skill trees real quick. We're not looking at Glacier Grenade this time, or Duskfield. Coldsnap is what we're going with because of Iceflare bolts. It'll make the ice trails split off into even more ice trails, and we're going to blow them up with void damage afterwards too. As for fragments, here's a complete list. It's not like there's a variety to choose from or anything, but they do actually make a difference. First one you're looking for is Bonds, which grants extra super energy after you kill frozen targets with any sort of weapons. You'll be doing that a lot. It's kind of what the game is about, so it costs a single tier of intellect and discipline to equip, so keep that in mind. You'll also need Durance, which doubles the duration of stasis effects such as slow or freeze, and it adds a single tier of strength, but don't get too happy about that because we're about to slot another fragment that's going to cancel that stat buff out entirely. Next up is Hedrons, which grants a bonus to weapon damage after freezing a target. It costs a single tier of strength, but armor stats and exotics will make up for that. And the last one on this list here is Refraction, which offers no stat costs or buffs and returns small amounts of class ability energy after killing frozen or slowed targets. This is important. Frozen and slowed. We'll get to that later. The next thing here is essentially optional. We're targeting ability regeneration from all sources, so with all the freezing and slowing going on, I personally take an Empowered Rift with me for the extra damage. Not actually necessary by any means, it's just my own little quirk that you're welcome to throw shade at me for. But just so we're clear, if you're taking a healing rift instead, I'm gonna take that grudge to my grave. Again, you'll hear more about that later. For all you new guys out there, let's look at aspects real quick, just in case you aren't completely and totally aware of just what they're capable of. Iceflare bolts. Freeze a target, shatter it, and bam, grenade energy in your pocket, receipt in hand. It also sends out small tracking ice bolts that'll freeze any targets they connect with, but the ability has a small 5-second cooldown. But it's still way more handy than you might initially think, so just spam it every chance you get. Frost Pulse. Cast a rift, freeze everything around you. Again, this is why I'll never forgive you if you take a heal rift, because the game is literally on its knees begging you to throw down a power rift, freeze everything in your path, and smash it to bits. I will never forgive you. Now that we got all the intricate stuff out of the way, let's look at some armor and guns. I reckon that's what everyone's actually here for anyway. Either that or they just want to hear my nasally voice ramble for 6.5 minutes once every couple days. We all know how Nezarec's Sin works. Stasis changes nothing. A good void weapon will make the best use of it, something like Graviton Lance or Fallen Guillotine, or maybe even Ruinous Effigy, though it did get a bit of a nerf and is nowhere near as effective with Nezarec as it was. Still great, but not my thing. I'll mention it so you guys aren't just like, hey, you forgot something important, because I get that all the time and honestly I'm sick of it, but I'm not going to recommend it. Not for this. For this you need splash damage. Void kills are going to kickstart Abyssal Extractors. It's a single stack buff with a stacking timer. One small kill equates to roughly 2 seconds, and successive kills after that will increase the time, allowing for maximum ability regen. On top of the fragments and the aspects, mind you. As for guns, like I mentioned earlier, something void, something strong, something preferably with a catalyst or a masterwork. I nabbed Graviton Lance because it's awesome, especially in scenarios where there's a plus 50% void burn outgoing. The orbs that precision kills generate also carry the same damage buff and everything just explodes, and they also proc Abyssal Extractor. It's just far too handy to ignore. If you can manage the best possible roll, Fallen Guillotine is still a prime DPS candidate, especially in void burn encounters. It'll proc Abyssal just the same as any other void weapon. It's great for both barriers and overloads. It is just another fantastic weapon that you want with all of this. Heritage will be your mid-tier damage dealer, so you're not tripping over your own feet running away from enemies because you don't have an energy weapon. Recombination is an extremely valuable perk, and it's even more lethal on a slug. I'm using Paradox in this footage because I make smooth brain decisions and I fat-fingered the dismantle key on the best heritage I'd gotten. I might have cried after that, but that's irrelevant. If this is all you got, then it's not a bad pick, but just be aware aware that there are better options in your kinetic slot. Lastly, we're going to take a look at mods, but not all of them. We're only looking at big boy mods, stat modifiers mostly, with some combat style mods in there as well. So let's take a gander real quick so we can move on to combat footage. Anti-barrier pulse is a thing this season for whatever reason, but since we've got Graviton Lance, you're going to need it. If reload speed bugs you like it bugs me, you could likely take enhanced pulse loader as well, but it's not really a necessary addition. Radiant light is crucial. That's a plus 20 strength right there if you've got another arc combat mod slotted on another piece of armor. That's why we've also got heavy-handed, which is going to activate radiant light and generate shotgun ammo upon successive kills while surrounded. It'll also restore half your melee energy after use at the cost of a charge of light. Nifty. Next up, you'll need 2 stacks of Shotgun Scavenger and maybe a single stack of Thermal Overload so you can deal with Overload champions. These are the important ones. They make all this far more a smooth ride than it normally would be. If your stat lines are lacking in any one area specifically, spec into that stat in your gen mods. My discipline is a lot lower than I'd like it to be, so I've got stat mods to compensate for it. Exotics and abilities will handle the rest, and you'll notice the effects almost immediately. So what are we doing exactly? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let me explain. This is a caster, and it all starts with Nezarec, hallowed be its name. Void kills are going to proc Abyssal Extractors. That's what Graviton and Guillotine are here for. Critical kills with Graviton are going to spawn Void Orbs that bounce around and hit for Void damage, which are also going to stack Abyssal Extractors. In encounters with a Void Burn, this is devastating for mob clusters. Once the Abyssal chain begins, the casting starts. Freezing targets with your Rift, your Grenade, or your Melee, it's not just going to stop enemies in their tracks, they're also going to give you a damage boost to all of your weapons, and those kills are going to give extra super energy as well. That's why I suggested a power rift, because even though the game doesn't tell you this, both a damage rift and a damage fragment should, in theory, stack on one another. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, but I've ran countless tests and all of them point towards the buffs stacking. Kills on frozen targets are going to send out Iceflare bolts on a 5-second cooldown. Precision kills with Graviton will both shatter and generate Void Orbs, adding even more to the mayhem. Cooldown time is something you're going to be juggling in the midst of all of this, so just let Nezarec and Void damage do the work on the big mob clusters while you freeze and shatter the big boys, like the champions. Graviton is going to work the barriers, and Coldsnap will stagger the overloads, making both of them easy targets for Guillotine. Honestly, what this all comes down to is just Stasis and Void working together to create a giant fuck you loadout. It's nowhere near as complicated as it all sounds when it's on paper. But that about sums all of this up. I know it's been a minute since my last video and everything, but I am ready to sit back down and get back to work. I just needed a minute. We're going to be taking a look at some cyberpunk stuff in the near future, so just be ready for that. Regardless, me in my cell, goodbye.